G'day, Hugh here from vrdesign.com.au, a design company based on the Gold Coast in Australia. Thank you for joining me. So a little while ago I went through a procedure in Photoshop whereby I created a fairly cinematic looking portrait. Well, I'm going to take those steps again and apply another technique for creating a very cinematic looking background. It's quite fun to do and creates very good looking results. So let's hop into Photoshop and see how that's done.
Okay, well the first thing we'll do is we'll start with the portrait and then we'll work with the background. But we'll get the portrait looking a little bit more dramatic than this quite standard looking shot that we've got here. So to begin with, we'll create a duplicate background. So we don't want, we want to have this available to us at all stages, because later on we're going to have to use that. So we'll just work on this top layer and we'll start with the filters. So sorry, with the levels, and we'll open up the image, adjust levels, and we'll just make a couple of quick adjustments here to start this looking a little bit more dramatic. And we'll put these numbers in here, and this will give us a little bit more contrast. How does that look? Already it looks a lot better. Now we'll keep this layer selected. Again, we'll come up to adjustments, and this time we will have a look at adjusting the hue and saturation. And what we'll do is we'll make the hue a little bit less of the red, but we'll bring the saturation right down. Take the saturation right out of the photo. Okay, so now we've got that done, we'll have a look at some curves. So we'll just go image, adjustments, and then we'll come to curves. So what we'll do is put in a classical looking flattened S. 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll just make some slight adjustments here. We don't want to go too far with it, but that looks quite nice. Have a look at that. Brilliant. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll duplicate this layer that we've got at the top here, and we'll put a high pass filter on it. So filter other high pass, make the radius 4 and say OK, and change the blending mode to overlay. Now you just need to switch the eye on and off to see just how much of a difference that makes. Quite stark. Very nice. Okay, so now we've got that in place, we can just hit shift, click on the layer below the high pass filter, and right click on the two of them, and we can merge the layers back into one layer. Now what we'll do is we'll just add a little bit more drama to this layer using the dodge and burn tools. So we'll select the dodge tool, have a nice soft edge brush of a decent enough size. We're going to work on the highlights, make sure the exposure is around 10% and protect tones is selected. And now we'll just choose some of those highlights there to bring them out, make them pop a little, just by clicking on them. Because we're at 10%, we're not going to create a huge drama with this, just a nice subtle addition to it. So we'll do the same with the midtones now, work on those midtones, improving them. And then we can come down here to the burn tool, make sure we're the same again, and soft brush. In this stage we will use the midtones. In fact, we could even go with the shadows, if I can select them, and keep that down quite low as well, and just really deepen up those shadows selectively like that. Definitely around the hair and the stubble. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. So now we've just got a couple of other adjustments we can make to this overall image. We've done our dodging and burning, so we can now make sure we've got this layer here selected, and we can come to image adjustments and come down to shadows and highlights. Now it does the defaults, which looks fine, but not quite what we're after here. We want a more dramatic feel to it, so I'll plug in some of these figures that will help us achieve that result. And we'll make that 20, also make that around 20 as well, maybe 25. The highlights, what we'll do here is bump that up to 15. Play around with the tone here a little, just drop it back, and put the radius in at 20, color down to 0, and we'll bump the mid-tone up to 15. Okay, now we can say okay to that. Now you can see we've really improved this this portrait to quite a big degree to make it look very dramatic. So what I think we'll just finish it off with is a filter to sharpen. Put an unsharp mask on, make that 25 and 25, and say okay. So it's grungy, it's pretty realistic, it's nice. It's you know, it's got a style to it. You can see a lot of detail. Yeah, it's cool. All right, so let's now work on the background. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to hide this layer, come back to our original layer, make sure that is selected. What we're going to do is come up to Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast, and just bring this brightness all the way right up. So okay to that. That means we can select our edges a whole lot better. Now we'll choose the Smart Selection tool, Quick Selection tool, and we'll just start selecting the background. And because I've bumped up the brightness on this layer, there's not a huge amount we have to do as far as the edges go. It knows pretty much where we're at with that, and I'm pretty happy with all that. You can spend a lot of time actually getting right in and getting these edges very precise. For a tutorial we won't be doing that. We just need the model selected so that we can put the background in. Okay, so now we've got that selected, we can come up to Select, Save Selection, and we can call it Portrait, and say OK. Control D to unselect, and then we're back to our original image. Now I have this photo I've taken here at dusk, so the lights were just starting to come on, and that's the sort of photo you want for this sort of effect, where if you've got these little lights here that are just sparkling in the background, and we'll create a background effect by doing this. So what we'll do is we'll get the Move tool, select the image, move it up to our portrait, and drop it on top, and we will then switch off our background, our portrait layer, and don't worry about that at the moment. We'll just move this layer into position, so we can use Control T to change the different size of it, and work out where we would like these lights to sort of be shining through, probably somewhere around that sort of area. We can always adjust that later on. Now we've got the layer selected, we want to come up to Filter, Blur Gallery, and choose Fill Blur. Okay, and we have got these sliders here that we can then start applying our effect to by sliding this light bokeh to the right, a fair way, around the 80% mark, and then with the blur slider, upping that, we can get these circles showing up. Now we can work on how big and small we would like them to be, and how much color we'd like in there. I like a bit of color in there, and we can choose this slider to reduce or increase the lightness of them. I think we decrease that lightness a bit, and we don't need it them too huge, but we do want them out of focus. So something along those lines, perhaps, maybe just a bit more intense. But that all looks quite nice. So we can say OK to that when that's done. And now we'll just let Photoshop go through and process that blur onto our lights, and then we will have a background that we're happy with. So we'll let that go. It's going to take a couple of seconds more. It's done. Now we can always move that around, and we can Control T and make it different sizes. So we might leave it at about there for now, and we'll work out exactly where we want to position it when we get in there. So now we're back to our background, back to our portrait. So we have saved the selection, so we can now apply that selection to our top layer by coming up to select, load selection. We have it here as we named portrait, and there we have it selecting our image. Now we'll come up to select and go inverse, so it's just selecting our model, and now we can put a mask on and it reveals that background. Now we can get into refining edges, and really, because he's got a bit of hair on his arms, there's a little bit of jaggedness there. With a bit of work you can remove that jagged look by refining edges when you're in your selection, quick selection tool, and really remove all that, but we won't worry about that for now. What we want to do now is start this to looking like it is something that we'd like to see in Hollywood. So it doesn't look like that at this stage. So I'll just do a couple of quick adjustments to our model first. So we can just do a little bit of work on, we can add a little photo filter in there. And I think a warming one, probably for our ultimate effect, could work quite well, but not with too much saturation in there. And I'll do a little bit of work on the exposure, and with these sliders we could just bring down that brightness a little bit, get him looking like he's actually in front of the city with a very shallow depth of field on your lens. And then we can just add a little bit of work on the levels further. Now we could go on all night doing that, but we won't. What we're going to do now is try and create that cinematic look. But first, before I do that, I'm going to go with a vignette, and I'm going to actually go with Control Alt Shift and the letter E, creating a layer above all the other layers as a combination. So what we'll do is we'll grab the elliptical marquee tool and we'll put that over our model like so, and I will hit the delete key and then change the blending to multiply, which is pretty good. Control D to unselect it. Now it has a vignette there, it's pretty strong. We can change the opacity to give us just that sort of look, and with that layer we can then just work out where it wants to be. We can't really move it around, so it's probably I'd say it's too strong in that regard, so it probably needs to come more in that sort of area there. I have Control D to unselect it, so we can Control Alt Z just to step back through and make sure that you've got your selection. We'll have to go again because I wasn't really too pleased with the way that was looking, so never be afraid to take a step back and try again, because you don't have to get it right the first time. So I think more than anything it's probably not wide enough, but we'll leave it for this for now, and we'll try the same thing again. So we'll go delete, change the blending mode to multiply, and just bring that opacity down so that we have that sort of vignette effect. Okay, it's a bit strong, but you get the idea. Now what we'll do is make sure we have this layer selected, and we'll just start creating this bit of Hollywood look to the portrait. So we'll start with an adjustment layer and a selective color, and we'll go to the reds, and we'll make cyan -15 and magenta +15. Okay. Now we'll come down to a new adjustment layer, and we'll go to channel mixer. And what we'll do here is blue, we'll make the greens 100%, and we'll make the blues 0. Click on that, and then with the hue and the saturation, what we'll do is we'll make the reds, we'll make the hue 20, and the saturation 40, and with the cyan we'll make the hue 0, keep the hue at 0, and make the saturation 40. And with the well, that's all we'll do with that for now. What we'll do is we'll add another adjustment layer for curves, and we'll choose red, and we'll make that so that's a nice looking cinematic look. We'll make the green the same, around the same, and with the blue, let's bring the blue down to about there. Very cool. And then RGB, we'll just make a bit of a half S on that, but not too much. Go a little bit too far. All right. Okay, and then we have a very different look now, which is really very nice. So then we can come into our model layer, and we can do any sort of other adjustments we feel like we need to do. So with this we might adjust the brightness or reduce the contrast. We can play around with that, but he definitely looks more in his element now than when we first began. So all I've used is a photo of Montenegro, Kotor, the Bay of Kotor in Montenegro, taken in the evening in April, and used that as the background, and come up with a really good looking portrait. We could work on these edges. We've got edges along here and definite edges along here, really fix them up, make them look a lot smoother, but the whole effect is really kind of cool. So that's all I'm going to do with this one for now. Hope you've enjoyed that. It's good fun, and you can play around with getting your image to blend a lot better, but that's the whole process of creating that background and making it look very cinematic, and you got those orange and teals, looks really nice. So I hope you've enjoyed that tutorial, and until next time I will catch you later.